One of the triggers for people with autism is change. When that change happens, the question is, how quickly do you adapt to the change, which is how quickly do you get used to the change? And because that's quite a struggle, often people with autism will just bottle up all the stress and the frustration that's happening.
Hey there, welcome to our podcast. Before we jump into today's episode, could you please do us a solid? If you're enjoying what you hear, give us a 5-star rating and hit that subscribe button on your platform. It really helps us reach more parents, coaches, and youth in the youth athlete development scene. All right, let's get into this week's chat.
Welcome back to the Inner Athlete podcast. I've got Dolly back. So Dolly was with us previously talking about children with ADHD, and we decided to did so well, and we learnt so much from her. I actually got quite a lot from it personally. We decided to get her back and talk about ASD, which is Autism Spectrum Disorder, and we're going to talk about how strength training can actually have some net positive effects for I guess children and teens specifically as well. But Dolly, do you just want to give us a quick rundown of who you are, what you do, and then we'll get straight into it.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Trent. It's lovely to be back on your podcast. So thank you for the opportunity. So as I mentioned the last time, my name is Dolly, and I'm a behavior support practitioner and a speech pathologist, and I work for the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So I've got my own organization called Behaviour Help, and I get to work with children, adolescents, and adults with a whole range of emotional and behavioral difficulties, and they may have, varying diagnosis. So autism spectrum disorder is one of the more common ones that I come across. And, I might help the individual that in their home environment, school, it could be in the community, employment, and also a lot in the corrective services system. So that's what I do.
Awesome. Now, for those who don't fully understand what ASD is, autism spectrum disorder, can you please give us just a bit of a definition, a bit of a rundown, and also like the subcategories that there may be under that as well?
Yeah, sure. So autism spectrum disorder falls under a big umbrella called neurodevelopmental disorders. So last time I talked about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, so ADHD. That's a type of a neurodevelopmental disorder. Intellectual disability, that's a type of neurodevelopmental disorder. And even autism spectrum disorder falls under that umbrella of neurodevelopmental disorders. And like I said the last time, what a neurodevelopmental disorder is where there are differences in the brain that cause the condition. So when we think about autism spectrum disorder, it's a result of differences in the brain size, how the brain functions, and how the brain develops. And that's because of the differences in the brain size, the functioning, and how it develops. That's what causes autism spectrum disorder. So when we think about, well, why is this person having differences in brain size, brain functioning, and brain development? What's causing this? There's lots of theories out there, so one of the theories is that maybe it's got to do something with, the environmental pollutants and the toxins. So it's got to do with the chemicals, we're inhaling, and the pesticides in foods, or, just other toxins in the environment. And what the research is saying is it's not a direct link. So it's one of the risk factors, but it's a bit like saying if we all lived in the same suburb and we're all breathing the same air, we're all eating the same food, and we're all drinking the same water, not all of us develop autism spectrum disorder. So, the environmental factors do contribute, but one of the strongest factors, or one of the strongest causes for autism, is genetics. So what genetics is saying is, one, I could either inherit the genes for autism spectrum disorder from somewhere within my family line that causes me to have autism spectrum disorder, or it could be a result of a genetic mutation. So for some reason, the genes mutate, which then results in me having autism spectrum disorder. So when you have autism spectrum disorder, two main areas are affected. One is social communication, social interaction, And the other one is restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. And I'll go through each one quickly. So like I said, the first area is social communication, social interaction. So, you know, as you hear social communication, social interaction, that word social keeps coming up. And what it's saying is, so it's not that the person with autism can't communicate. So they may be able to communicate with words, or they can communicate with gestures, or they might use photos, they might use pictures, you know, so they can communicate, but it's the social aspect that's affected. So what I mean by that is, let's say if I'm sitting here feeling hungry, or I'm feeling nervous, or let's say I've got a question, or I don't understand this. What the social bit is saying is knowing that if I'm feeling hungry, I need some help, I'm not understanding something, I'm feeling nervous, I actually need to initiate, as in I actually need to express, to communicate that to another person. But what often happens in autism is the person doesn't initiate. It's almost like you are dependent on other people to recognize, is there an issue over here? Are you okay? Do you need some help? Do you need to go to the toilet? So often the person depends on other people to initiate that. The other thing that's difficult in autism, it's that social interaction, that conversations and making friendships, you know, the two-way conversations. So a bit like, you know, if I've got an interest in dinosaurs, then that is all I want to talk about with you. But that back and forth isn't really happening, as in, okay, so I'm sharing my interest with you, but what I'm not doing is asking you, well, what are you interested in? Let's say you say, you're not interested in dinosaurs, you know, that's okay. Let me talk about other things. But in autism, it's hard. It's like you have limited topics of conversations. So it's really hard for you to, one, show interest in other people, and then, you know, listen to what other people have to say, ask them questions about their interests, and build on that. Any questions on what I've just said till now?
No, I'm just making notes.
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense, some sense.
Yeah. So
Yes.
you mentioned, there's a difference between social communication and interaction. So you said the social communication is the inability or the lack of ability for the initiation to communicate. So if you're hungry, thirsty, you need to go to the toilet, something like that. But then the interaction side, they may have a specific interest that they're keen in, which might be, you know, quite limited. Like with Ethan loves his, you know, his world wars and all that jazz. But for some of them, they find it really difficult to kind of show interest in someone else. It's more about their self-interest in that case because of what happened to the brain specifically. Yes,
you're right. And also another thing you will notice is difficulties with just how the person uses their nonverbal communication. So, you know, or lack of eye contact. And the reason why it's hard to make eye contact when you are communicating is because for some people with autism, listening and making eye contact at the same time is actually quite painful, and it's actually hard. It's like they can't do both things at the same time. And then the question is, well, you know, do we need to force someone to make eye contact? And of course, the answer is no. But it's just important to acknowledge that when we don't make eye contact, you know, you do miss out on information. So what I mean by that is, as I am talking, if you're, you know, starting to roll your eyes, you're looking away, or you're looking at your clock, your watch, I'm sorry, by me looking at you and reading your cues, I'm picking up, you might be getting bored with what I'm saying, or maybe it's not relevant, or maybe you're getting confused and you're like, how much more longer do I need to put up with this for? And then what I do is I adjust my communication based on that. So when you don't make that eye contact and you don't look at in the person's direction and get that information, you know, communication breakdowns can happen. So an example might be, let's say you're looking at your clock as a way to gesture, come on, hurry up. But because I'm not looking at you and I'm looking in another direction, I'll keep talking. And then you have to, you feel quite rude to almost say, I'm so sorry, Dolly, I need to go now and bye. And I'm like, oh, he suddenly left. But that's because I missed out on all the other earlier cues you were giving me that we were running out of time and you needed to leave.
Yeah. And that probably goes back to that initiation part.
That's right.
Well.
Yeah. Yeah. And with the initiation, so, you know, so the reason why it's called a spectrum disorder is because every skill that I have mentioned, whether it be eye contact, whether it be initiation, it's all on a continuum, which means on the one end, you do not initiate. So you just simply do not bring up, you know, your needs, your wants, your feelings. You just don't initiate. Whereas on the other extreme end, you only initiate when you have a need, when you have a want, when you have a feeling. And in the middle, you are initiating, but it's probably not enough, or it's a little bit too much. So every skill's on a continuum. So even as people who are listening to this, they might think, well, that I've seen that, but I haven't seen that. And that's fine, because every person with autism is unique. Yeah.
Now, does the individual, can this improve their ability? So if they have little to no initiation skills, can that improve over time as they get older?
So what is needed is explicit, systematic, direct instruction. So all those words simply mean is having the opportunity. So an example would be if, let's say, let's say going to the toilet. Sorry for silly examples, but you know, when you're presenting, it's just silly ideas come into your head. Anyway, so let's say you need, you know, so let's say for this particular child, as the parent or as the teacher, if, you know, every 2 hours, I'm the one saying, do you need to go to the toilet? Do you need to go to the toilet? What's happening is, because as the adult, I'm the one always initiating, the child's dependent on me to prompt them to do something. And if I keep doing this forever and ever, the child's not going to learn that idea of I need to initiate. So it's really important, whatever you can absolutely help the person stretch, develop skills to whatever extent they can, but we need to provide them with the opportunity. We need to provide them with the right sort of support so that they can actually practice using the skill. So it doesn't, what I'm trying to say is it just doesn't magically appear. So just because, you know, you're an adult, it doesn't mean the skill will appear. You need to be given the opportunity to practice those skills and learn them. Yeah.
Sure. Now I know we have quite a few children and teens with ASD, with diagnosed with ASD. Do they face any like physical challenges as well when it comes to like sporting participation or anything along those lines? Or is it very hard to tell because they may like a particular sport and they're actually quite good at it?
So what the research says is a lot of children with autism and teens have got difficulties with fine motor skills and gross motor skills. So, you know, fine motor skills are like, you know, your fine sort of movements like writing, cutting, buttoning up your shirt, eating with utensils. So fine motor skills, and then gross motor skills are your large muscles, you know, large movements like, you know, lifting or running or jogging and so on. And the difficulty really is the coordination aspect of it, because when you're writing, it requires, you know, to coordinate a lot of muscles in a particular way. And even with running or jumping or any of your strength training exercises, they need to be done in a particular way. You can't just haphazard however you want to do it. So a lot of individuals with autism struggle with this. And this is where coming to the gym and developing these skills is so beneficial, because you know, like I mentioned in the previous podcast, you know, sports and playing in a team is a great way of building connections with others. So that social skill, building self-esteem and so on. So they have difficulties with this. So it's important that whatever exercise program is developed actually starts off with really recognizing what are the fine motor, gross motor difficulties they have, and then gradually helping them build those skills.
Yeah, so that's basically how we initiate anyone that comes in the gym. That's an individualized process, finding out where they're actually at, where their actually skills lie in terms of gradual, and finding that starting point for them, then gradually building upon that over time as well. And we've seen some really good positive transformations with a lot of kids that actually feel a lot stronger, a lot more confident and competent, which has a transfer effect as well. And what we're finding is now they take a bit more initiative as well. And in terms of, you mentioned before about that the initiation process, right, when it comes to cleaning. So we get all our members, put their equipment away once they're done. We do cue them to actually put their equipment away and say, hey, once you're done with it, pop it away. It's like, oh, yeah, cool. Sometimes they may need reminding, but majority of the time, they're actually generally good. And this takes, like you said, repetition, in order for them to recognize that they are responsible to actually put their equipment away after they've actually used it as well. Or if they need assistance, they'll actually ask for help. So that's that, I guess, that social, the communication side that you mentioned as well. So we've seen a lot of positive changes with that as well. I wanted to ask, in terms of the motor coordination side, what it's like, I guess the question I'm really trying to ask is, if they're finding gross motor skills are on the decline, or not on the decline, but at a low level relative to their peers who don't have ASD, how? And then you mentioned that they may have that that social connect, the social interaction side, where they may feel frustrated or something like that as well, or struggling. How do they go about regulating themselves when they find things really difficult?
So what happens in autism is one of the difficulties is emotional regulation. So emotional regulation is the ability to identify what you're feeling, express what you're feeling, and then know how to manage what you're feeling. So in autism, a lot of individuals with autism have difficulties with identifying what they're feeling. So why is that? One, it could be to do with you've got an extremely small feelings vocabulary. So everything is sad or happy, or angry, just the basics, sad, mad, happy, rather than I'm feeling bored, or this is making me nervous, this is making me feel, nauseated, whatever those feelings are. So being able to, one, that vocabulary is quite small. The other thing is it's called interoception. So interoception. And what interoception is, it's the ability to know what signals is your body sending you and what do they actually mean. So what I mean by that is, if my stomach is grumbling, and so that could be, so one, it's me knowing, okay, that's my stomach grumbling. And then what does that mean? That means I'm hungry. Or let's say my bladder is full. And so that means I better quickly go to the toilet. So it's reading those signals. Or my heart is beating really fast. That means I'm getting puffed and I better now start slowing down. Or I can feel my cheeks really burning now, and I can feel myself sweating quite profusely, which means my body's getting really hot, so I better have a drink of water. So reading your body signals, understanding what it means, labeling those body signals, and then managing them, it's all part of emotional regulation, and that is quite difficult in autism. So what happens then is you might be exercising for a while, but you haven't picked up that you needed to go to the toilet, or you were thirsty, or you needed to have a break. So then when you finally stop, you appear to go 0 to 100, but that's because you've not been taking regular breaks or listening to your body, and then managing those feelings. So what then happens is in the school environment. A lot of children with autism, what they do is they keep a tight lid on their emotions. So they're not reading their body cues, or they're just suppressing it because they don't want to stand out at school. They just want to fit in. They just want to survive the day and not get into any more trouble. But then as soon as someone safe comes to pick them up, so let's say the parent comes to pick them up or they arrive home, well, off comes this lid and now we're exploding.
Yeah, because you mentioned something really interesting, is that interoception is just that recognition of how they're actually feeling or what's actually going on
in your body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing with pain versus fatigue?
Yes. So again, knowing the difference between, oh, that's pain, and also knowing where in your body is the pain. So, if I've got a sore head, I've got a sore mouth, I've got a sore tummy, it's being able to know where are these signals even coming from. Or with fatigue, so with fatigue or tiredness, everything's on, there's degrees, there's an intensity. I'm a little bit tired to, I am so tired, I can't even stand up. So it's even knowing those gradations. And again, in autism, that's hard. So you might feel a little bit tired, but you might go, I am just so tired, I can't do anything. Or I am extremely tired, but I'm still pushing myself.
Yeah, because we've noticed that a few times with a few members where they say this is really hard and really difficult, where it seems like they're moving really well. It's like it's a parallel difference between what we're actually seeing versus what they're actually experiencing. And then the other difference is that pain versus fatigue. It's like they say if this is painful, then we ask them, it's like, oh, where does it feel painful? And they may find it really difficult to describe where the pain is specifically. But usually with pain, it's very specific. It's a specific site, and it causes them to stop immediately. But they may continue on with the exercise, and usually it could actually be more fatigue, which is more just a byproduct of exercise, right? Your repetitions slow down, you've got to build up of metabolites, and you're inducing fatigue, which is what we want to create a stimulus of strength and muscle growth and tissue regeneration. So I'll break down tissue. So we find that quite interesting, is helping them to differentiate between the two. Is like, is this actually pain? Is it is it sharp? Is it dull? Or is it like you just feel like it's feeling really slow and heavy in that case?
And it's so hard because exactly like you're saying, one, you need to have a good vocabulary of language to be able to understand what dull, sharp, what the difference between those words are. And so you need that comprehension, but also you need those expressive language skills to go and to really describe what you're experiencing. And again, how I said social communication, social interaction is impaired. So having that vocabulary is affected. So so it's a lot of, it can be guesswork for even you as you're looking at the person, because I know I've said a lot of things. One of the other things I'd mentioned was difficulties with nonverbal communication. So what also happens is you're having your facial expression match what you are feeling on the inside. So, you might be feeling really angry, but when you look at the person, it's like they've just got a poker face. It's a neutral face. So you can't even pick up they're happy or they're angry. Or let's say they're really sad, but they're laughing. And so sometimes there can be a real mismatch between what they're feeling on the inside and what they're actually showing. So that makes it even harder for you to see just, what is the person really expressing.
And then what would be some strategies in that case then of, I guess, getting a bit of a gauge of when you go see them for the first time for the day or for the week or something like that? What would be, I guess, from a coach's perspective or a parent's perspective, what would be a strategy of working with these individuals to gauge where they're actually at before you start working with them for that hour or two?
So what they say is that, people with autism are 90% visual. So 90% visual and 10% auditory. So all that simply is saying is that they've got a real strength in as a visual learner. So, abstract concepts like feelings, if you can represent feelings like, pain, thirsty, hungry, or even temperature or whatever it is on a visual, so you could have pictures of different feelings, emojis, you could have a pain meter, you could have a pain scale or a tiredness scale, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not saying just by looking at it, the person go, oh, I now can recognize all these feelings and I can now rate what how much pain I'm in. But what that visual does is it actually provides a very tangible way of understanding a little bit more of what you're communicating. And if we use that same feeling scale or that pain meter each time, then, I've got a better chance of getting it rather than us just trying to talk about it, which is just, just all out there and doesn't mean much.
That's actually really good to know. I reckon all coaches would just benefit just having, something laminated and, they say, how does this exercise feel out of 10? Were you really fatigued? No, yes. And then grading it based on, whether it's using numbers and using pictures to help represent that, what each number means in that case.
Yeah, I mean, I've put together an app called Rainbow of Emotions, and that's the idea behind it. So it's it's Rainbow of Emotions.app, and basically it allows, and I've used the idea of the rainbow, but you can change it if you want to. And the idea behind it is you can have quite a lot of, each line in the rainbow represents a different emotion, and you can actually rate the emotion. So yeah, so whether it's that app or anything else, but by using it, exactly like you're saying, you can actually help the person identify what they're feeling. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. Then how important is doing some sort of physical activity, some structured, regular physical activity is for individuals with ASD?
Yes, thank you. So, and I'm sure you say this to everybody on the planet would benefit from doing some form of physical exercise. So, I talked about interoception as that being a sensory issue, which is simply that, you're having difficulties with recognizing and understanding your body signals. There's not all people with autism have difficulties with these two areas, but it's called vestibular and proprioception. So what vestibular is, what the vestibular sense is, it's your sense of movement, balance and movement. So for some people with autism, and each of these that I'm explaining, and I'm so sorry for all this information, I hope it's easy to follow. So with the vestibular sense and the proprioceptive sense, one way to think about it is you can either feel too much of it or too little of it. So an example would be, so let's take vestibular, which is about movement. For some people, a little bit of movement is just too much. It's like, let's say I've gone for a walk, a nice gentle walk. There has been no increase in heart rate, not sweat, but still the fact I've moved. It's like after that walk, I've got to sit down. It's like I've got to now lie down in bed, arms out, and and I need to just relax because I've done a bit of movement. So for some people, a little bit of vestibular movement is just too much. And it's like, I need to have a break to recover from that bit of movement. Whereas on the other end, because it's a spectrum, that bit of movement was nothing. That was actually frustrating. How come I wasn't running, and how come there wasn't a lot more huff and puff involved in it, and you need to run 5 laps, and that's barely enough. So movement is absolutely important, but it's really figuring out how much movement do you like, what type of movement do you like, and how long is just right for you. Because what happens is that when you have enough movement, it's regulating and it's calming. But but if it's too much or if it's not the right type, it can be dysregulating. So another example, and then I'll pause, would be, let's say jumping on the trampoline. Now, for some people, that up and down movement is really calming and they could be jumping on that trampoline for hours. It could be raining, it's thundering, there's thunder, lightning, hailing. Doesn't matter. We need to do that every single day to regulate ourselves. Whereas for some people, doing that bounce movement for a couple of minutes maybe is tolerable, but after that, it's like we are just so dysregulated and we are not calm. So again, it's really about, and there is no exact science to this, it's really about trial and error and working out and observing and just seeing what is the person's response like when they've done the exercise. But the most important question is, what were they like when they got home from, let's say, gym? Were they regulated and calm, or were they so dysregulated that you're like, oh, never sending my child again to the gym because I don't know what happened at gym, but they're just so all over the place. Any questions about vestibular before I move on to proprioception?
Keep going.
Oh, okay, great. Okay. So with proprioception, so vestibular was about balance and movement. Proprioception is about pressure, deep pressure. So again, deep pressure is very calming for the body. It's alerting for the body. It calms it, but it also, I'm ready now to do some more work. So that deep pressure, lifting things, anything heavy, it's very calming for the body. And often a lot of people with autism benefit from that, because what's happening is, as your body is getting stressed, it needs that deep pressure to calm itself down. And you're the expert in this area, so I'm sure you can tell us more about deep pressure. But the key over here is, if that is what you need to calm your body down, then throughout the day, you need regular input. So what I'm now trying to say is, if at the gym, we're doing things like push-ups, where, which is deep pressure, or let's say you're lifting something or you're carrying something, then it's about not waiting for the end of the day at 6 o'clock, going to your gym and having that hour session. The question really is, how can we transfer those exercises, functional exercises, to throughout the day and me getting regular input, so I am calm, rather than needing it, just, getting it at being so dysregulated that, needing then the gym to calm me down. I hope that made some sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the exercise becomes the medicine in order to calm the system down.
Yes.
So dosage at the right time, it might be, after reset, I don't know, before recess, after recess, they might go out and do some Tai Chi or something like that.
Yeah.
Or,
and in autism spectrum disorder, so in this field, the term we use is called a sensory diet. So what a sensory diet is, it's like thinking from the moment you wake up to when you go to bed. So you know how, so just so people can picture it, when you go on a diet, you're meant to have small portions of food at regular intervals throughout the day. So instead of having one big meal, it's about splitting it up and having regular portions of food throughout the day. So in the same way with the sensory diet, if let's say, because we're just talking about vestibular and proprioception, if let's say movement or proprioception, so heavy work keeps me calm throughout the day, then it's making sure throughout the day I get regular opportunities for vestibular and proprioception, which is the movement and the heavy work activities throughout the day, so then I can stay regulated.
And basically what you're saying is it can be dosage dependent as well as the individual.
Yes.
So maybe someone who requires that more often maybe needs to do it like at school, like after every period when they have that transitionary period across.
And it would be so good, in an ideal world, to, just to learn from the program you've created for the child, what are those exercises? Because let's say you say, oh, this child's really good at push-ups, let's say, or really good at basketball. It would be good for school to know and at home, because then those can be offered even at home and school.
Yeah, it's just, look, it might even be something simple as, let's just do a set of 15 push-ups. And then after those 15 push-ups, then usually their focus will come back into the room.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, because like you said, it's like that bottling effect, right? You're preventing the bottle, pressurize, whether it's the emotions or whatever it may be. So if they're able to kind of let it go early on and throughout the day, then there is no explosion at the end of the day. Once they're in that safe space, it's like it's been managed throughout the whole day, depending on obviously what the individual may like. So it could be something simple as, 5 minutes, just play on the play equipment, or, play a quick game of tag or something like that in the yard, and get everyone in. What's today's lesson? Then going through the work afterwards.
And what's really good is because, you've got the coaches available there, and the coaches have, systematically provided that direct, systematic, and that explicit instruction on how to do those exercises. And, the child's gotten more confident and is doing them in a competent way. It would be really good if those exercises can then be practiced in other settings, rather than a whole new exercise being offered, in a school environment that the child doesn't even know how to do.
Yeah, I get your point. And what would be some key strategies in terms of for parents as well? So if they have a child with ASD, maybe that they're not doing regular exercise, or at the end of the day, more often than not, their emotions do bottle over. What would be your suggestion moving forward in terms of helping their child to better regulate their emotions, but also be able to get more out of school to become more independent later on in life?
So, how I talked about that bottling, where you bottle up your emotions, let's say at school or daycare or wherever you are, you just bottle it all up. And then, like you said, it's like a pressure cooker. And as soon as, you see that safe person, which is the parent, off comes the lid, and here we're all exploding. So it would be good to talk to school about how their child is presenting once they leave the school grounds. Because what happens in autism is, how I mentioned that the nonverbal communication doesn't really match what you're feeling on the inside. So there's a lot of masking. So there could be changes. One of the triggers for people with autism is change. So a change could be, my regular teacher is away. We were meant to do this, we were meant to do art, but I'm sorry, now we're doing some other activity. Or today it's because Anzac Day is coming up now, suddenly we're having Anzac Day celebration. So, which is all fine and understandable, but that change is a big trigger for people with autism. And when that change happens, the question is, how quickly do you adapt to the change, which is how quickly do you get used to the change, and then also get over the fact that the regular person wasn't there, the regular activity did not happen. And because that's quite a struggle, often people with autism will just bottle up, all the stress and the frustration that's happening. And so at school, it might look like the child's coping. He's doing so well. She doesn't even need any help. She's had a great day. But as soon as you step out, the child's having a meltdown. So the message really is, just because I can't see the stress on the person's face, it doesn't mean it's not there. It's a bit like, if I had a can of Coke over here that was shaken, you're not going to know it was shaken until you open it. So I think, so even if as the teacher, I think, no, she's coping with change, just use the good practice guidelines you would with anyone with autism. So things like providing some sort of a pre-warning and an explanation about why the changes happened. So, if, for example, I know, let's say I'm the teacher and I'm going to be away tomorrow, preparing the child in advance and explaining to them why I'm going to be away, even if I'm saying something like, I've got to go to a meeting, or I've got to go to training, easy, whatever it is. So preparing the child for that. Also understanding that, so one is change, but the other one is flexibility. So often a lot of individuals with autism, they have this insistence that things have to be done in a certain way. So if, let's say, my favorite teacher has said, this is how I should write the date and my name and do something, well, that's how it should be. And even though you're a different teacher, I'm sorry, this is how I prefer for things to be done. So really understanding that there is that bit of inflexibility. So what I'm not saying is we just do everything in a very routine, robotic way. It's hard to do that. That's not life. But the question really is, how many things am I expecting you to be flexible on? Is it 10 or is it just one? How about we start with just one, and then tomorrow, or not tomorrow, somewhere down the track, we might increase it to 2, then we increase it to 3. Because if I use the approach that, oh, look, that's just life and you've got to be flexible and you've got to roll with it, it's going to be too much for the person and they're just going to shut down.
Yeah, and they'll just pull out and they'll be like, no, don't want to deal with it.
That's right, exactly. And that's why you see often quite a lot of school refusal behavior. And it's really tricky because as far as school's concerned, the child's doing so well at school, there is no issue. But then for some reason, but for a whole number of reasons, the child then doesn't want to go back to school, and school just can't believe it because he or she is fine when they're here.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well, working with individuals with ASD, is we usually ask for feedback on the programs that they've done because we want to change it because we want them to progress. It's like, all right, is there any exercises that you don't like? Is there any exercises that you do like? Would you like to progress to the next stage of doing a kettlebell deadlift or a trap bar deadlift? And it's like, and you show them what it is. It's like, oh, I would like the idea of that. So you kind of open the suggestion box for them. And it's like, they either take it or they don't, which makes it easy for us, to be honest. And it provides that flexibility, but also that preparation in order. Like we say, next time when you come in, this is what's happening. So you're going to have a new program. This is what's going to be on it. And then we'll keep some of the stuff that you enjoy as well.
Yeah, perfect. And I think, just that always reinforcing that, we can change it, and, you can have a goal and just see how you feel about it. You're just sowing the seeds, because a lot of us are scared of change. And as soon as we hear the word change, we just want to run the other way. So, the fact that if you keep bringing it up and you normalize it and you just show what that change would actually be, because in your head, you're catastrophizing and you're going, oh my goodness, this whole new program, it's going to be just so hard and it's going to be so different and there's no way can I do it. So it's great that you visually show what that change looks like. So it takes away that fear about it. Yeah.
Or sometimes we'll be like, oh, do you want to try this exercise? Or we got a new piece of equipment. Do you want to give it a go? And they're like, they'll say yes or no. So I'm like, all right, we'll ask them again next week.
Perfect.
We give it a go. It's like, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
kind of create that preparation for that. Where can people find you, Dolly? So if they want to connect with you to the services, whether it's parents, coaches, schools, where can they find you?
Yeah, thank you. So I've got a website called behaviorhelp.com, and on there I develop a lot of resources. So I've got apps, I work in the area of positive behavior support. So a lot of positive behavior support books, which specifically look at challenging behaviors or behaviors of concern. And then I also work as an NDIS consultant. So, that's how I provide. So if anybody wants to get in touch through the website, easy.
Cool. I really appreciate your time, Dolly. I definitely picked up quite a bit from this one as well. And I'm sure it's going to benefit everyone who listens to this in terms of practical application as well, and especially how strength training really does have a huge impact on the kids and teens that we actually look after that do have ASD. So thanks for your time, Dolly. And
thank you so much.
And we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
You have just listened to the Inner Athlete podcast. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with the release of weekly episodes. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get great tips on all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring.